Boy buys shirt at thrift store and finds an emperor's old letter. Subscribe for more exciting stories. On an autumn morning in Chicago, Nathan Parker methodically organized the piles of manuscripts on his desk at the small publishing house where he worked as an editorial assistant. At 25, he had learned to balance his love for literature with a tight budget, developing a keen eye for treasure hunting in the city's thrift stores. His wardrobe was an eclectic collection of carefully selected vintage pieces that gave him an air of sophistication even with his modest salary. That Friday afternoon, after reviewing the day's last manuscript, Nathan decided to make his traditional visit to Mrs. Betty's thrift store, a cozy little shop in the city center. The doorbell chimed when he entered, and the characteristic smell of old books and vintage fabrics enveloped him like a familiar embrace. Among the meticulously organized racks, one piece particularly caught his attention, an emerald green shirt from the 1950s, with a classic cut and mother-of-pearl buttons. This would be perfect for Sarah, he thought, remembering his best friend's upcoming birthday, a history teacher with a passion for vintage fashion. Upon closer examination, Nathan noticed the exceptional quality of the fabric and the Italian label, indicating its European origin. He decided to try it on to check the fit, even though he was slightly larger than Sarah. It was in the fitting room, while adjusting the collar, that his fingers found something unusual, a small bulk in the lining. Examining more closely, he discovered a secret pocket sewn with mastery, almost imperceptible to the casual eye. Inside it, a letter yellowed by time, carefully folded. Curiosity was stronger than his usual discretion. Carefully, to avoid damaging the aged paper, Nathan unfolded the letter. The paper had an expensive texture, and the elegant handwriting revealed privileged education. The date at the top indicated May 15, 1985, and the first lines made his heart race. "My dear Isabella, after all these years, the truth weighs too heavily on my conscience to remain silent. The empire I built, the Vega Group, is not what everyone thinks. Each floor of our skyscraper was erected on altered documents and shady negotiations that harmed many families." Nathan felt his hands tremble. Alexander Vega was a name he knew well, the American tycoon of Spanish origin, who had transformed a small family business into one of the country's largest conglomerates. But what disturbed him more was the memory that name evoked. His father had worked for the Vega Group for 15 years, until his sudden and unexplained departure a decade ago. As he read the rest of the letter, fragments of whispered conversations between his parents during his adolescence began to make sense. The nights his father came home dejected, the discussions about business ethics, and finally, his voluntary resignation that was never really explained. The letter continued with revelations about financial manipulations, forged documents and fortunes built at the expense of small investors. Alexander confessed to Isabella how he had systematically altered accounting records for his own benefit, harming hundreds of employees and their families. "I need to buy this shirt," Nathan decided, carefully tucking the letter back into the secret pocket. As he headed to the cashier, he noticed a middle-aged man watching him with peculiar interest. The stranger pretended to examine a hat rack, but Nathan could feel his eyes following him. After paying for the shirt, Nathan quickly left the store, his mind buzzing with possibilities. Who was Isabella? Why had Alexander Vega written that confession? And more importantly, what was the connection between those revelations and his father's abrupt departure from the company? As he walked home, Nathan didn't notice that the man from the thrift store was watching him from the window, making a discreet call on his cell phone. His casual discovery was about to trigger a series of events that would change not only his life, but also reveal secrets long buried in the heart of the Vega Empire. Upon arriving at his small apartment in Lincoln Park, Nathan carefully hung the green shirt in his wardrobe. Looking at that seemingly ordinary piece, he was certain that his life was about to change drastically. What had begun as a simple purchase in a thrift store was about to transform into a journey in search of the truth, a truth that could finally explain the mysteries that had haunted his family for so many years. The next morning, Nathan woke up before the alarm, his mind still processing the events of the previous day. The green shirt hanging in his wardrobe seemed to call to him, as if it held even more secrets beyond the letter he had found. Sitting at his small work desk, he reread the missive several times, absorbing every detail of Alexander Vega's confession. While having his coffee, he decided to research more about the Vega Group. The old headlines revealed the company's success story. Vega Group expands operations to international market. Alexander Vega, the visionary who revolutionized the American market. But among the triumphant news, Nathan found small notes about employees who had left the company under mysterious circumstances, exactly like his father. Determined to better understand this connection, Nathan called his mother, Helen, with the excuse of an early Sunday lunch. A few hours later, he was sitting in the cozy kitchen of the house where he grew up, watching his mother prepare a pot roast that perfumed the entire environment. "Mom," he began cautiously, "I've been thinking a lot about the time Dad worked at the Vega Group. He never really explained why he left, did he?" Helen stopped stirring the pot for a moment, and Nathan noticed a subtle tension in her shoulders. "Your father has always been a man of great integrity, Nathan. Some decisions in life are difficult, but necessary. He discovered something irregular in the company, didn't he?" Nathan gently insisted. His mother sighed, sitting down at the table. "Your father was the chief accountant of the financial division. One day he came home different, disturbed. He spent nights reviewing documents, making notes. He talked about inconsistencies, about numbers that didn't add up." She paused, her eyes lost in memories. "When he decided to resign, he received a tempting offer to stay silent. But you know your father. He preferred to leave with a clear conscience." Nathan felt a lump in his throat. And where is Dad now? Richard, his father, had been traveling for 3 months, supposedly providing financial consulting in different states. "In Florida, as far as I know. But he's been so busy we can barely talk," Helen replied, with a touch of concern in her voice. That afternoon, upon returning to his apartment, Nathan found an envelope with no return address under his door. Inside was only a card with a typed message. "Not all secrets should come to light. Some truths are too dangerous." Disturbed but even more determined, Nathan decided to look for Isabella, the recipient of the letter. A quick search revealed that Alexander Vega had a stepdaughter named Isabella Vega Santos, who had distanced herself from the family after a mysterious disagreement. The latest news indicated that she was living in a coastal town, running a small inn. As he organized his discoveries, Nathan received an unexpected message on his cell phone. "I saw you find something in the green shirt. We need to talk. Old Town Coffee tomorrow, 10 a.m. Charlie Mendez, former CFO of the Vega Group." The name made Nathan freeze. Charlie Mendez had worked directly with his father and left the company at the same time. His photo in the company records showed the same man who had been watching him in the thrift store. That night, as he prepared a folder with his notes and the original letter, Nathan received a call from Sarah, his teacher friend. "Nathan, you won't believe it. I got that researcher job at the city's historical archive. Now I have access to all the business records from the last 50 years. An idea began to form in his mind. With Sarah in the historical archive and the possible help of Charlie Mendez, maybe he could finally unravel the secrets that had changed the course of so many lives, including his family's. Before going to bed, Nathan looked at the green shirt once more. What had begun as a simple purchase in a thrift store was turning into an investigation that could expose decades of corporate secrets. In the back of his mind, a concern grew. Where was his father really? And why did his consulting trips coincide with the moment he had started asking questions about the past? Lying in his bed, Nathan planned his next steps. The meeting with Charlie Mendez could be a trap, or his best chance to understand the truth. Either way, he knew there was no turning back. He was determined to find out what had happened at the Vega Group, not just for his father's memory, but for all the families that might have been affected by the secrets kept for so long. The Old Town Coffee was a charming establishment in the heart of Chicago's Old Town neighborhood, known for its nostalgic atmosphere and discreet clientele. Nathan arrived 10 minutes before the agreed time, choosing a corner table that gave him a clear view of the entrance. His hands were slightly sweaty as he held his espresso cup, his eyes alternating between the door and his watch. At exactly 10 a.m., Charlie Mendez entered the coffee shop. Despite his graying hair and slightly limping walk, his astute eyes quickly scanned the environment before fixing on Nathan. With a brief nod, he approached and sat down. "Nathan Parker," said Charlie, his voice low and calculated. "Richard Parker's son. You look a lot like your father." Nathan nodded, trying to maintain his composure. "Mr. Mendez, thank you for contacting me. I confess I'm a little confused about all this." Charlie leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Nathan's. "The letter you found, it should never have come to light. There are powerful forces that would prefer certain secrets to remain buried." "What kind of secrets?" Nathan asked, his curiosity overcoming caution. Charlie sighed deeply. "The Vega Group isn't just a company, Nathan. It's a labyrinth of interests, alliances, and manipulations. Your father and I discovered this the hard way." In the next few minutes, Charlie revealed a complex web of financial irregularities, dubious contracts, and accounting maneuvers that had artificially inflated the value of the Vega Group for decades. They weren't exactly illegal, he explained, but certainly unethical. Alexander Vega was a master at navigating the gray areas of the law. Nathan absorbed every word, his suspicions being confirmed. "And my father, Richard, was brilliant," Charlie continued. "He started to notice patterns, subtle discrepancies that others had ignored. When he confronted Alexander, he was offered a generous early retirement. But your father, well, he had principles." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a young waitress, who smiled timidly as she served more coffee. Nathan noticed Charlie tense up, his eyes following the waitress until she walked away. "We can't talk more here," Charlie murmured, "but there's something you need to see. A file that your father and I compiled before we left the company. It's hidden, but with the right clues you can find it." Charlie slid an envelope across the table. "Inside are coordinates and instructions. Follow them carefully. And Nathan," he paused, his gaze intense, "be cautious. You're not the only one looking for answers." When Charlie got up to leave, Nathan stopped him with a question. "Why help me? Why now?" The former CFO hesitated, a flash of emotion crossing his face. "Let's say I owe your father a debt, and maybe it's time to correct some past mistakes." After Charlie's departure, Nathan remained at the coffee shop, his mind a storm of thoughts. The envelope in his hand seemed to weigh tons, loaded with promises and dangers. He knew that every step from there on would take him deeper into a world of corporate secrets and possible retaliation. Deciding he needed an ally, Nathan called Sarah. "Hey, can you meet me at the historical archive this afternoon? I think I've discovered something big, but I'm going to need your help to unearth some old records." "Sure," Sarah replied, her voice mixing curiosity and concern. "Nathan, is everything okay? You sound different." "I'm fine," he assured, though not entirely convinced. "I'll explain when we meet." "Oh, and Sarah? Don't mention this to anyone, okay?" Ending the call, Nathan looked at the envelope once more. The coordinates led to a location in the outskirts of Chicago, a rural area he vaguely recognized by name. With a mix of apprehension and determination, he tucked the envelope in his pocket and left the coffee shop. On the way to the historical archive, Nathan couldn't help but notice a black car that seemed to be following him at a distance. Paranoia or reality, he couldn't tell. But one thing was clear: the game he had just entered was much bigger and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. As he walked, Nathan made a silent promise to himself and his absent father. He would go all the way, no matter the cost. The truth about the Vega Group, about his father, about Alexander and Isabella, all of this was within his reach, and he was determined to uncover every detail, even if it meant facing forces that had preferred to keep these secrets buried for decades. The Chicago Historical Society building was an imposing structure, its neoclassical facade contrasting with the modern skyscrapers around it. Nathan climbed the marble stairs, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. As he entered the air-conditioned lobby, he spotted Sarah, who was waiting for him with an anxious smile. "Nathan, you finally made it," she said, pulling him to a discreet corner. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." He hesitated, aware of the other researchers around. "It's complicated, Sarah. I discovered something about the Vega Group. Something big. I need your help to dig through some old records." Sarah's eyes widened at the mention of the conglomerate. "The Vega Group?" "Nathan, this is serious. They practically built half of this city." "Exactly," Nathan whispered, "and I think not everything was built cleanly." In the next few minutes, Nathan summarized his discoveries to Sarah, from the mysterious letter to his meeting with Charlie Mendez. Her expression oscillated between shock and fascination. "My God, Nathan, this is "This is bigger than anything we've ever seen," she murmured. "Where do we start?" Nathan took Charlie's envelope out of his pocket. "First, we need to find all the financial and contractual records of the Vega Group from 1980 to 1990. Then we'll cross-reference this information with the clues we have here." The two spent the next few hours immersed in piles of dusty documents, microfilms, and digitized records. With each new discovery, the puzzle began to take shape. Contracts with suspicious clauses, financial transfers to shell companies, and a series of acquisitions that always seemed to benefit the same groups of investors. "Nathan, look at this," Sarah called, pointing to a document. In 1985, the Vega Group acquired a series of lands in the suburbs for a fraction of the market value. Months later, the construction of a new highway passing right through these areas was announced. Nathan felt a chill. Insider information. They knew about the highway before everyone else. As they continued their research, Nathan noticed a man in a dark suit entering the archive, his eyes scanning the environment calculatedly. Instinctively, he ducked down, pulling Sarah with him. "What is it?" she asked, alarmed. "I think we're being watched," Nathan whispered. "We need to get out of here, but first—" He quickly photographed the most relevant documents with his cell phone. Blending in with a group of students leaving, Nathan and Sarah managed to leave the archive without being noticed by the mysterious man. On the street, they walked quickly, alternating directions to shake off possible pursuers. "Nathan, this is getting dangerous," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "Maybe we should tell someone. The police, maybe?" Nathan shook his head. "We still don't have concrete evidence, just suspicions, and we don't know who's involved or how far this goes." He stopped, looking into Sarah's eyes. "You can back out now if you want, I'd understand." Sarah took a deep breath, her gaze hardening. "No way, we're in this together. Besides," she smiled weakly, "I always wanted to be a detective." Arriving at a busy cafe, they sat down to review the collected information and the clues left by Charlie. The coordinates in the envelope pointed to an old farm on the outskirts of Milwaukee. "That must be where Charlie and my dad hid the evidence," Nathan murmured. "We need to go there." "When?" Sarah asked. "Now," Nathan replied, checking the time. "If we leave soon, we'll get there before nightfall." As they prepared to leave, Nathan's cell phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Be careful who you trust. Not all friends are what they seem. IV." Nathan frowned, showing the message to Sarah. "IV Isabella Vega. Or someone posing as her," Sarah pondered. "Either way, I think we're on the right track." Leaving the cafe, the two friends boarded a taxi heading to the bus station. The trip to Milwaukee would be short, but Nathan knew that every mile was taking them deeper into a labyrinth of corporate secrets and possible dangers. In the back seat of the taxi, Nathan looked out the window, observing the city he had always known with new eyes. Every building, every avenue now seemed to hide a story, a secret. He wondered how many other truths were buried beneath the shiny surface of Chicago's progress. Sarah held his hand, offering a comforting smile. "We'll uncover the truth, Nathan. For your father, for all the people affected." Nathan nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. The journey that had begun with a simple shirt in a thrift store was now taking him into the unknown. But he knew there was no turning back. The truth, however dangerous it might be, needed to come to light. As the taxi sped towards the bus station, Nathan couldn't help but notice a familiar black car a few vehicles behind. The feeling of being watched intensified. The cat and mouse game had begun, and he was determined not to be the prey. While the afternoon progressed, Nathan knew he was only scratching the surface of a much larger mystery. The answers he sought were there, hidden in the documents and digital files, but each revelation brought with it new questions. One thing, however, was clear. There was no going back. The search for truth had put them in the crosshairs of powerful and dangerous people. Nathan looked at Sarah, seeing in her the same determination he felt. "Let's keep going," he said, his voice firm. "For the truth, for justice, and for everyone who's been affected by these secrets." Sarah nodded, a tired but resolute smile on her face. Together till the end. And so, as the city slept outside, two young people continued their journey in search of the truth, defying the power and influence of one of the largest corporate empires in America. The sun was beginning to set when Nathan and Sarah arrived at the old farm on the outskirts of Milwaukee. The taxi dropped them off at the entrance of a dirt road, refusing to go further due to the precarious state of the path. With backpacks on their shoulders and flashlights in hand, the two friends began the walk towards the farmhouse, visible in the distance. The property seemed to have been abandoned for years. Vegetation grew uncontrolled, engulfing fences and rusty agricultural equipment. The silence was broken only by the occasional bird song and the rustling of leaves in the wind. "Nathan, are you sure this is the place?" Sarah asked, her voice a mix of apprehension and excitement. He consulted the coordinates on his cell phone once again. "Yes, we're in the right place. Charlie said the evidence would be hidden in the main house." As they approached the house, a colonial construction in a state of deterioration, the tension between them grew. The front door was locked, but a side window yielded easily under pressure. "All right," Nathan whispered, helping Sarah to enter. "Let's split up and look for anything out of the ordinary. Safes, trapdoors, anything that could hide documents." The two searched the house, the creaking of the floorboards echoing through the empty rooms. After almost an hour of fruitless search, Sarah's excited voice cut through the silence. "Nathan, come see this!" He ran to the kitchen where he found Sarah kneeling near the wood stove. She pointed to one of the stones on the floor, slightly misaligned with the others. Carefully, they removed the stone, revealing a secret compartment. Inside, they found a metal box, protected by a combination lock. "Damn," Nathan muttered, spinning the numbers randomly. "How are we going to open this?" Sarah frowned, thoughtful. "Wait, you said the letter was from 1985, right? Try that date." Nathan turned the numbers. 1985. With a satisfying click, the lock opened. Inside the box, they found a series of documents, cassette tapes, and a modern USB drive, clearly added later. Nathan examined the papers, his eyes widening with each new revelation. "Sarah, this is amazing," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We have detailed records here of all the Vega Group's suspicious transactions over the last 30 years. Secret contracts, bribes, bid rigging." Sarah, who was examining the USB drive on her laptop, gasped. "Nathan, there's more. Emails, bank transfers. It looks like your father and Charlie continued collecting evidence even after they left the company." As they examined the contents of the box, a noise from outside the house made them freeze. Car headlights briefly illuminated the dusty windows. "Someone's here," Nathan whispered, quickly putting the documents in his backpack. "We need to leave now." They moved silently towards the back of the house, hearts racing. Through a crack in the window, they saw two men in suits getting out of a black car, the same one Nathan had noticed in Chicago. "They followed us," Sarah murmured, fear evident in her voice. Nathan nodded, his mind working quickly. "We'll use the darkness to our advantage. There's dense brush behind the house. If we can get there without being seen, we can circle around and get back to the main road." With utmost caution, they exited through the back door, crouching among the tall bushes. The sound of footsteps and muffled voices came from the front of the house, indicating that the men had entered. Nathan and Sarah moved slowly through the uneven terrain, each step calculated to avoid making noise. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally reached the dirt road, far enough from the farm to feel safe. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, still breathless from the escape. Nathan checked his cell phone, grateful for having a signal. "I'm going to call a taxi. We need to get back to Chicago as fast as possible. There we'll decide our next move." As they waited for the taxi, hidden behind an old fence, Nathan couldn't help but think about his father. Where was Richard now? Did he know that his son had discovered the truth he had worked so hard to protect? The taxi arrived after 20 tense minutes. During the trip back to Chicago, Nathan and Sarah remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The evidence they carried in their backpacks had the power to expose decades of corruption and change the fate of countless people. It was past midnight when they arrived at Nathan's apartment. Exhausted but alert, they began to organize and analyze the documents. "Nathan," Sarah said softly, holding a photo found among the papers, "I think you need to see this." The photo showed Alexander Vega, Charlie Mendez, and Nathan's father, all young and smiling, in front of what appeared to be the first Vega Group office. Nathan felt a lump in his throat. The story was more complex than he had imagined. His father wasn't just an employee who had discovered irregularities. He had been a fundamental part of building the Vega empire. As the night progressed, Nathan knew he was only scratching the surface of a much larger mystery. The answers he sought were there, hidden in the documents and digital files, but each revelation brought with it new questions. One thing, however, was clear. There was no going back. The search for truth had put them in the crosshairs of powerful and dangerous people. Nathan looked at Sarah, seeing in her the same determination he felt. "Let's keep going," he said, his voice firm. "For the truth, for justice, and for everyone who's been affected by these secrets." Sarah nodded, a tired but resolute smile on her face. Together till the end. And so, as the city slept outside, two young people continued their journey in search of the truth, defying the power and influence of one of the largest corporate empires in America. The following day dawned with Nathan and Sarah still poring over the documents, their eyes tired but determined. Nathan's apartment, usually tidy, now looked like a battlefield of papers, post-it notes, and laptop cords. "Nathan, look at this," Sarah called, pointing to the computer screen. "I found a series of emails exchanged between Alexander Vega and some important politicians. It seems they were negotiating changes in zoning laws to benefit Vega Group's real estate projects." Nathan frowned, examining the messages. "This explains how they got approval to build in protected areas. Sarah, this is much bigger than we imagined. It's not just about unethical business practices. It's about manipulating the system itself." As they continued their analysis, Nathan's cell phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at Grant Park, near Buckingham Fountain, at 2 p.m. Come alone, Ivy." "Isabella Vega," Nathan murmured, showing the message to Sarah. "Nathan, it could be a trap," Sarah warned, concern evident in her voice. He nodded, thoughtful. "I know, but it could also be our best chance to understand this whole story. I need to go." "Then I'm coming with you," Sarah insisted. Nathan smiled, grateful for his friend's loyalty. "No, it's too risky, but I'll keep my phone on and give you my real-time location. If something goes wrong, you'll know." At 1:55 p.m., Nathan arrived at the designated spot in Grant Park. The day was pleasant, with families and joggers enjoying the mild sun. He sat on a bench overlooking the fountain, his eyes alert to any suspicious movement. At exactly 2 p.m., an elegant woman in her 50s sat down beside him. Without looking directly at him, she spoke in a low voice. "Nathan Parker, you look a lot like your father." "Isabella Vega, I presume," Nathan responded, his heart racing. She nodded slightly. "You found the letter. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone uncovered the truth. Why contact me now?" Nathan asked. Isabella sighed, finally looking at him. "Because you've stirred up a hornet's nest, Nathan. The people behind the Vega Group aren't just greedy businessmen. They're powerful individuals with connections at all levels of government and society. Including your adoptive father, Alexander," Nathan added. "Especially him," Isabella confirmed. "Alexander built an empire based on favors, blackmail, and manipulations. The letter you found was his attempt to confess, to ease his conscience, but he never had the courage to make it public." Nathan processed the information, his suspicions being confirmed. "And you? What's your role in all of this?" Isabella's eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "I spent years trying to expose the truth, but I was always silenced. Threats, bribes, they have many methods. When I found out you were investigating, I realized this could be my last chance to do the right thing." She handed Nathan a flash drive. "Here's everything I've managed to gather over the years. Names, dates, transactions. It's enough to bring down not just the Vega Group, but to expose a corruption scheme that spans decades." Nathan took the flash drive, feeling the weight of responsibility. "Why trust me? Because your father, Richard, was one of the few honest men I knew in this world. And because you're willing to risk everything for the truth, just like he did." At that moment, Nathan noticed two men in suits approaching rapidly. Isabella noticed too, standing up abruptly. "They've found us," she whispered urgently. "Nathan, run. Don't let them get this information. The truth needs to come out." Without time to think, Nathan stood up and started running through the park. He could hear heavy footsteps behind him, his heart pounding frantically in his chest. Zigzagging between trees and surprised people, he tried to shake off his pursuers. Reaching a busier area of the park, Nathan blended in with a group of tourists, trying to camouflage himself. He saw the men passing by, looking frantically around. Seizing the opportunity, Nathan left the park and hailed the first taxi he saw. "To Michigan Avenue, please, and hurry," he panted. In the taxi, he sent a quick message to Sarah. "I'm okay. Things got serious. Meet you at the emergency spot we agreed on." As the taxi moved away from the park, Nathan looked at the flash drive in his hand. There were the answers he was looking for, but also a danger he was just beginning to comprehend. The truth was within his reach, but the price for revealing it could be higher than he had ever imagined. With adrenaline still coursing through his veins, Nathan knew the next steps would be crucial. He needed to protect the information, find trustworthy allies, and above all discover his father's whereabouts. The battle for truth was just beginning, and he was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The emergency meeting place was a small cafe in Chinatown, chosen for its discreet location and the ease of blending into the crowd. Nathan arrived first, choosing a table in the back with a view of the entrance. His eyes kept scanning the environment, alert to any suspicious movement. Minutes later, Sarah entered, her face a mixture of relief and concern as she spotted Nathan. She sat down quickly, leaning in to speak in a low voice. "Nathan, what happened? Are you okay?" He nodded, briefly relating his encounter with Isabella and the chase in the park. When he showed the flash drive, Sarah's eyes widened. "This changes everything," she whispered. "What do we do now?" Before Nathan could answer, a familiar voice surprised them. "You two need help." Turning around, they faced Charlie Mendez, the former CFO of the Vega Group. He sat down uninvited, his tired eyes reflecting years of secrets. "How did you find us?" Nathan asked, suspicious. Charlie smiled slightly. "You're not the only one with resources, Nathan. I've been watching you since the beginning. I knew you'd eventually reach this point." Sarah, recovering from the surprise, asked, "Why did you decide to reveal yourself now?" "Because you're about to face forces you don't fully understand," Charlie responded, his tone grave. "The Vega Group isn't just a company. It's the center of a web of influence that extends throughout the country." Nathan hesitated, but decided to trust his instinct. He told Charlie about the meeting with Isabella and the contents of the flash drive. Charlie's eyes glowed with a mixture of fear and determination. "This is more than I ever managed to gather. With this information, we can finally expose everything." "But how?" Sarah asked. "They seem to have influence everywhere." Charlie leaned forward, lowering his voice even more. "Not everywhere. There's a federal prosecutor, Robert Almeida, who has been discreetly investigating the Vega Group for years. He's our best chance to bring this to justice legitimately." Nathan nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "How do we contact him?" "Leave that to me," Charlie replied. "But first we need to ensure this information is safe. I suggest we make copies and store them in different locations." Over the next few days, the trio worked tirelessly, analyzing the data, creating backups, and establishing a strategy. Charlie used his contacts to arrange a secret meeting with prosecutor Robert Almeida. On the appointed night, they gathered in an anonymous office in downtown Chicago. Robert, a middle-aged man with penetrating eyes, listened attentively as Nathan and Charlie presented the evidence. "This is extraordinary," Robert finally said after hours of analysis. "With this, we can not only bring down the Vega Group, but expose a corruption scheme that spans decades." "What's the next step?" Nathan asked anxiously. Robert took a deep breath. "Prepare a solid case. This will take time, and it needs to be done with extreme caution. Meanwhile, you all need to stay safe. The people involved won't hesitate to do anything to prevent the truth from coming out." As they discussed the details of the plan, Nathan's cell phone vibrated with a message. His heart almost stopped as he read, "Son, I'm okay. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the place where we used to fish." "Come alone." "Dad." Nathan showed the message to the others, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. "It could be a trap," Charlie warned. "Or it could be your chance to finally understand the whole story," Sarah added, squeezing Nathan's hand in support. Robert nodded gravely. "Go, but take every precaution, Keep us informed at all times." The next morning, Nathan drove to the small lake on the outskirts of the city, where he used to fish with his father in childhood. The place was deserted, except for a solitary figure sitting by the water's edge. With his heart racing, Nathan approached. The figure turned, revealing the tired but familiar face of Richard Parker. "Dad," Nathan whispered, tears in his eyes. Richard stood up, embracing his son tightly. "Nathan, my son, I'm so sorry for all of this." As the sun rose on the horizon, Father and son began a long conversation, unearthing long-hidden truths and forging a new understanding. Nathan knew this reunion was just the beginning. The battle for truth and justice was far from over, but now he was no longer alone. With his father by his side and a determined team supporting him, Nathan felt, for the first time since the beginning of this journey, truly prepared to face whatever lay ahead. The truth, however painful it might be, would finally come to light. The days following Nathan's reunion with his father were intense. Richard Parker, now reunited with his son, brought with him a new perspective and crucial information for the case. Nathan's small apartment transformed into an improvised operations center, with Sarah, Charlie, and occasionally prosecutor Robert Almeida working tirelessly to build the case against the Vega Group. Richard, with tears in his eyes, had told Nathan the whole story. How he, Charlie, and Alexander Vega had started the Vega Group with ambitious ideals, but how gradually Alexander had let himself be corrupted by power and greed. Richard and Charlie tried for years to keep the company on ethical tracks, but eventually realized that the corruption was too deep. When we discovered the extent of Alexander's schemes, we knew we had to act, Richard explained. But he was too powerful. Our way out was to silently collect evidence over the years, waiting for the right moment to expose everything. The team worked day and night, cross-referencing information, verifying documents, and building a detailed timeline of the Vega Group's crimes and irregularities. The case they were putting together was solid, but also dangerous. Each new day brought the feeling that the noose was tightening around them. It was on a rainy afternoon, almost a month after the investigation began, that the situation reached its critical point. Nathan was alone in the apartment, organizing the final details of the report they would deliver to the Department of Justice, when he heard a strong knock on the door. Cautious, he approached, looking through the peephole. His heart raced when he saw Alexander Vega in person, accompanied by two menacing-looking men. "Open the door, Nathan," Alexander's voice sounded, calm but authoritative. "I know you're there. We need to talk." Nathan hesitated, his mind racing through all possible exits. Finally, knowing he had no choice, he opened the door. Alexander entered, his eyes scanning the apartment full of documents and laptops. "Impressive," he murmured. "You've gone further than I imagined." "What do you want, Alexander?" Nathan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The old businessman sighed, suddenly looking tired. "I want to propose a deal. I know what you and your father have discovered. I know you have enough evidence to destroy me and everything I've built." Nathan crossed his arms, suspicious. And I'm willing to negotiate," Alexander continued. "I can offer you and your family financial security for the rest of your lives. All I ask is that you destroy the evidence and forget this story." For a moment, Nathan was silent, processing the offer. Then, to Alexander's surprise, he laughed. "You really think this is about money?" Nathan asked, incredulous. "This is about justice, about doing the right thing, something you seem to have forgotten a long time ago." Alexander's expression hardened. "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with, boy. Think carefully before you make a decision you might regret." At that moment, the door opened again. Richard entered, followed by Charlie, Sarah, and, to Alexander's complete surprise, Isabella. "Enough, father," Isabella said, her voice firm. "It's over." Alexander looked around, seeing himself surrounded. His gaze stopped on Richard, his old friend and partner. "Richard, please. Think about what you're about to do. Everything we built." Richard shook his head sadly. "What we built hasn't existed for a long time, Alexander. It's time to face the consequences." At that moment, sirens sounded from outside. Prosecutor Robert Almeida entered, accompanied by FBI agents. "Alexander Vega," Robert announced formally, "you're under arrest on numerous charges of corruption, fraud, and obstruction of justice." As Alexander was led away, Nathan felt a mixture of relief and sadness. The empire built on lies was finally crumbling. In the weeks that followed, the Vega Group case dominated the headlines. The extent of the corruption shocked the country, leading to a series of investigations that reached the highest levels of government and business. Nathan, now recognized as the young man who helped expose one of the largest corruption schemes in American history, found himself at the center of a media storm. But for him, the true victory was in the reconciliation with his father and the feeling of having done the right thing. On a quiet afternoon, Weeks after the final confrontation, Nathan found himself back at Mrs. Betty's thrift store. His fingers ran through the hangers until he found a familiar emerald green shirt. With a smile, he picked it up. The shirt that had started it all now seemed a symbol of his journey. Nathan bought it, deciding to keep it as a reminder that sometimes the biggest secrets and the greatest truths can be found in the most unexpected places. As he left the store, Nathan reflected on everything that had happened. The search for truth had changed his life in ways he could never have imagined. But now, with the weight of secrets finally lifted, he felt ready for whatever the future might hold. The city outside seemed different now, cleaner, more honest, and Nathan knew that no matter what came next, he would always fight for the truth, no matter where it took him. A year had passed since the fall of the Vega Group. The city of Chicago, once shaped by the shadows of the corporation's skyscrapers, now breathed an air of renewal. Nathan Parker, the young man who had triggered one of the largest corruption investigations in the country, walked through the streets of downtown, observing the subtle but significant changes around him. The morning sun reflected off the facades of buildings, some of which once belonged to Alexander Vega's empire. Now, these structures housed new companies, startups, and non-profit organizations, symbolizing a fresh start for the city's economy. Nathan stopped in front of one of these buildings where a sign announced Truth and Progress Foundation for a More Ethical America. With a smile, he entered, greeting the employees already moving through the lobby. In the elevator, he met Sarah, now the foundation's research director. "Ready for the big day?" she asked, a glimmer of excitement in her eyes. Nathan nodded, adjusting his tie. "It's still hard to believe we've come this far." The Truth and Progress Foundation had been born from the ashes of the Vega scandal. Created by Nathan, his father Richard, Charlie Mendez and Isabella Vega, the organization was dedicated to promoting transparency in business and politics, as well as offering legal support to whistleblowers and investigating corruption allegations. In the meeting room, Nathan found his father, Richard, chatting animatedly with Charlie. The two men, once tired and haunted by secrets, now displayed renewed vitality, dedicating their experiences and knowledge to building a more ethical future for the country. "Son," Richard called, embracing Nathan, "the auditorium is packed. Looks like half of Chicago came for the book launch." Nathan smiled, a mix of pride and nervousness in his chest. His book, Unraveling the Labyrinth, The Fall of the Vega Group and the Rebirth of a Nation, was about to be released. More than a narrative about the scandal, it was a call to action for a new era of corporate responsibility and active citizenship. As they prepared for the ceremony, Isabella entered the room carrying a box. "Nathan, I thought you might want to wear this today," she said, handing him a package. Curious, Nathan opened the box, revealing the familiar emerald green shirt that had started the whole journey. "How?" he began, moved. Isabella smiled. "I bought it back from the thrift store. I thought it would be an appropriate symbol for today." Putting on the shirt over his dress shirt, Nathan felt transported back to the beginning of his adventure. How much had changed since then, not just in his life, but throughout the country. The auditorium was indeed packed. Journalists, students, businessmen, and politicians crowded to hear the story that had shaken the foundations of power in America. As he took the stage, Nathan felt the weight of responsibility, but also the lightness of the truth finally revealed. "A year ago," he began, his voice echoing through the microphone, "I was just a young editorial assistant with a modest salary and a taste for thrift store clothes. Today I stand before you not as a hero, but as someone who simply chose to do the right thing when confronted with a difficult choice." As Nathan narrated the story, from the discovery of the letter to the final confrontation with Alexander Vega, the auditorium remained in absolute silence, absorbing every word. "What we've learned from all this," he continued, "is that real change begins with small acts of courage. It's in an accountant's decision to question suspicious numbers, in a journalist's determination to investigate beyond appearances, in the integrity of a politician who refuses a bribe." Nathan paused, his eyes scanning the audience. The Vega case isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. The real work starts now, with each of us deciding every day to build a fairer and more transparent country. As he concluded his speech, the room erupted in applause. Nathan saw tears in his father's eyes, pride on Sarah's face, and a sense of shared purpose among all present. Later, at a small celebration with friends and family, Nathan found himself reflecting on the incredible journey he had lived. The emerald green shirt, now a symbol of his adventure, rested on a nearby chair. Sarah approached, handing him a glass of champagne. "To the future," she toasted. "To the future," Nathan responded, smiling, "and to all the truths yet to be discovered." As the night progressed, Nathan knew his journey was far from over. The Vega case had been just the first chapter of a much larger story, the story of a country rediscovering itself, reinventing itself, and finally facing its deepest demons. Outside, the lights of Chicago shone against the night sky, no longer as symbols of corrupt power, but as beacons of hope. And Nathan, with the green shirt as a constant reminder, was ready to face any challenge the future might bring, always in pursuit of truth and justice. The saga that had begun with a simple purchase in a thrift store had transformed into a national movement for change. And as Nathan looked out the window at the city he loved so much, he knew that the real work was just beginning. With a determined smile, he raised his glass once more, silently toasting to the transformative power of truth and the courage to do the right thing, no matter the cost.